Hashima Island, Japan 1887, 1974. Long ago, off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, there was a city so dense, so alive, and so efficient that it was once called a symbol of the future. From the sea, it looked indestructible. Concrete walls rose straight out of the water. Buildings were stacked tightly together, every inch of land used. Lights burned day and night. Thousands of people lived on a space smaller than a few city blocks. This was Hashima Island. And for nearly a century, time moved faster here than anywhere else in Japan. Until it stopped. Hashima's story began in 1887, when coal was discovered beneath the seabed surrounding the island. At the time, coal wasn't just fuel, it was power. It drove factories, ships, railways, and empires. Japan, rapidly industrializing, needed it desperately. So Mitsubishi bought the island. What followed was one of the most extreme urban experiments ever attempted. Hashima had no natural space for growth. So engineers did something radical. They expanded the island itself. Concrete seawalls were constructed to reclaim land from the ocean. High-rise apartment blocks were built decades before such buildings became common elsewhere in Japan. Schools, shops, hospitals, and recreation areas were stacked vertically. By the 1950s, Hashima became the most densely populated place on Earth. Over 5,000 people lived here, surrounded entirely by water. There were no cars, no gardens, no escape. Everything depended on coal. For those who lived there, Hashima was not bleak. It was efficient. Children went to school, families shopped at local stores, movies played in theaters, rooftops became playgrounds. The sea was always visible but unreachable. Work was dangerous. Miners descended nearly 1,000 meters underground, into hot, cramped tunnels beneath the ocean floor. Accidents were common, conditions were brutal. But the pay was good. And as long as coal mattered, Hashima thrived. By the 1960s, something shifted. Oil began replacing coal as the world's primary energy source. It was cheaper, easier to transport, more flexible. For Hashima, this wasn't a slowdown. It was an extinction event. The island existed for one purpose. When that purpose vanished, so did its future. Production declined, mines became less profitable, maintenance costs rose, cracks appeared in the concrete, literal and symbolic. And then in 1974, Mitsubishi made the decision. The mines would close. There would be no transition period. No reinvention plan. No gradual decline. The city would be evacuated. Families packed what they could carry. Schools closed, shops emptied, lights went out. Within weeks, Hashima Island went from one of the most crowded places on Earth to completely empty. No war, no disaster, no warning sirens. Just silence. After the evacuation, Hashima was sealed off. Buildings were left as they were, furniture remained, classrooms froze in time, laundry still hung in apartments when residents left. Nature began its slow reclaiming. Wind, salt, rust. And time moved on everywhere except here. But Hashima is not unique. It is a warning, because it raises a question that modern cities still haven't answered. What happens to a place built perfectly for its time, when time no longer needs it? Hashima Island, Japan 1974, present. When the last boat pulled away from Hashima Island in April 1974, there were no crowds watching from the shore. No ceremony. No farewell. Just a concrete city sealed and left behind. And almost immediately, time began treating it differently from the rest of the world. For years after the evacuation, Hashima remained completely off-limits. Windows shattered under typhoon winds, salt air corroded steel, concrete cracked and peeled. Entire buildings began to collapse inward, not from violence but from neglect. Inside the apartments, everyday life was still visible. Desks sat in classrooms. Shoes remained by doorways. Televisions faced blank walls. Nothing had been cleared out. Hashima wasn't abandoned gradually. It was paused. In theory, the island could have been reused. But in reality, it was already obsolete. Hashima had been built around one purpose: coal. Its infrastructure, housing, and layout made sense only as long as the mine operated. Without it, the city had no economy, no supply chain, and no reason to exist. Maintaining the seawalls alone would have cost more than the island could ever produce. So it was easier to leave it untouched. And forgetting it turned out to be simple. For decades, Hashima barely appeared in public discussion. Former residents moved on, Mitsubishi shifted its focus. Japan raced forward into the late 20th century, becoming a global technological leader. Meanwhile, the island sat offshore, visible but unreachable. Time passed everywhere else. Here it stalled. In the early 2000s, something changed. Photographers, historians, and urban explorers began noticing Hashima again. Images of its crumbling buildings spread online. The island earned a new nickname, Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, for its silhouette against the sea. People weren't drawn to Hashima because it was old. They were drawn to it because it was unchanged. It looked like a city that had lost a race against time and never recovered. In 2009, Japan officially reopened Hashima to limited tourism. Visitors weren't allowed inside most buildings. The structures were too unstable. Instead, they walked along reinforced paths, observing the ruins from a distance. Then, in 2015, Hashima Island was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its role in Japan's industrial history. The city that had been abandoned without ceremony was now preserved. Not restored. Preserved. Hashima is no longer a place to live. It's a place to remember. It represents a moment when industrial ambition outran adaptability, a city engineered perfectly for one era, with no flexibility for the next. And that is why it still feels unsettling. There was nothing wrong with the people. Nothing wrong with the buildings. Nothing wrong with the city itself. The world simply changed. Modern cities like to believe they are permanent. Hashima proves otherwise. When a city is designed entirely around one resource, one industry, or one assumption about the future, it becomes fragile. When that assumption breaks, the city doesn't decline. It stops. Time moves on without it. Hashima Island wasn't destroyed. It wasn't conquered. It wasn't rebuilt. It was left behind. And that makes it one of the most honest places on Earth. A city that shows what happens when progress changes direction and never looks back. The buildings still stand, but time no longer visits. If you want more true history documentaries about forgotten cities, abandoned places, and moments when the world quietly moved on, subscribe to the channel. Because history doesn't always end in disaster. Sometimes it just leaves.